Linda didn't waste time after her van was taken. She wasn't the kind of person who waited for others to fix her problems. She had always believed in doing what needed to be done, even if it meant stepping out of her comfort zone. She sat at her kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her. Her service dog Max lay quietly beside her, watching her every move like he always did. James brought her tea and sat across from her. "What now?" he asked. "We start telling people," Linda said firmly. "We can't let them think they can do this to anyone else." The first thing she did was call the local news station. She left a message explaining what happened, how the HOA had been pushing her for months, how they had no legal power over her home, and how they had her van towed without warning or permission. Then she reached out to a veterans support group online. She posted her story on their forum, making sure to include pictures of her empty driveway and screenshots of the HOA letters. Within hours, people started responding. Some were angry, others were shocked. Many shared similar stories about HOAs, acting like they could do whatever they wanted. But even with all that support, getting the van back wasn't easy. When Linda called the towing company, they kept putting her on hold. When she finally got through, the man on the phone sounded bored. "Look, ma'am, we got a call from the HOA saying the vehicle was illegally parked. We followed protocol." "But I don't belong to the HOA," Linda replied calmly. "They have no authority over me. You had no right to take my van," the man sighed. "I'm just doing my job. If you want your van back, you'll have to pay the storage fee and file a dispute." "How much?" $300. Linda couldn't believe it. Not only had they taken her van without cause, but now she had to pay just to get it back. James saw the look on her face and leaned closer. "Let me handle this." "No," Linda said gently but firmly. "This is my fight." She decided to go straight to the source, the county office that handled property laws and HOA boundaries. She made an appointment and asked if she could bring someone with her. They said yes, so she invited a friend from the veterans group who knew how to speak up in public meetings. The meeting took place in a small government building downtown. Linda rolled into the room in her wheelchair, Max walking beside her. She presented copies of her deed, maps showing her property line, and the HOA's threatening letters. The official listened carefully, flipping through the papers. "This seems pretty cut and dry," he finally said. "You're not under HOA jurisdiction. That means they had no legal reason to interfere with your property." Linda nodded. "So what happens now?" "Well, I can write a letter confirming that. But as far as the tow goes, that's more of a civil issue. You might need to talk to a lawyer." Linda left the meeting with the letter in hand, but she still didn't have her van. That night, she sat on the porch with Max resting his head on her lap. James came out with 2 cups of coffee. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, sipping her drink. "Just thinking." "About what?" She looked out at the quiet street. "I've spent most of my life helping people. First in the military, then as a nurse, and now with Max. I've never been the kind of person to make a scene." James smiled. "You're not a scene maker. You're a problem solver." She gave a soft laugh. "Well, maybe it's time to solve this one differently." She had an idea. The next morning, she called her friend Maria, who worked with a K-9 training center. They had helped train Max and many other service dogs. Maria also helped organize community events to raise awareness about disability rights and police dog programs. "Hey, Maria," Linda said when her friend answered. "Would your team be interested in doing a public demo right here at my house?" Maria paused. "Like a live K-9 show?" "Exactly, just a small one. A few dogs, some training routines, maybe even a meet and greet. Let people see what working dogs can do and remind everyone that we protect what matters." Maria loved the idea. "That sounds amazing. I'll reach out to the trainers. We can set something up in a week or 2. Word spread fast. The event was advertised on Facebook, flyers were posted at the library and community center, and even the local paper picked up the story. Disabled veteran hosts K-9 demonstration after HOA conflict. That headline alone caught attention. On the day of the event, several cars pulled up. People brought lawn chairs and kids. Reporters showed up with cameras, and one by one trained K-9 officers walked onto Linda's front yard with their dogs. There was a German Shepherd who could sniff out hidden objects, a Belgian Malinois trained in search and rescue, even a young Labrador who was learning to become a therapy dog for children with autism. Each demonstration was powerful. Dogs leapt over fences, found hidden items, and responded to commands with perfect timing. Max even got to show off a few tricks he knew. The crowd clapped and cheered. But the real message was clear. Linda wasn't helpless. She wasn't afraid. And she had a whole pack of loyal friends ready to stand with her, including four-legged ones who could do more than bark. By the end of the day, the story had gone viral online. Local radio stations talked about it. More people reached out to help, and Linda finally felt like things were turning around. Her van was still gone, but now she had something bigger. She had proof that people cared, and she had a plan. Because, while the HOA thought they could push her around, they had no idea who they were really dealing with. Linda Harper was a quiet woman who liked peace more than drama. She lived with her husband James in a small town where most people knew each other by name. Their house wasn't big or fancy, but it was cozy, and it was paid off. That meant a lot to them. No monthly mortgage stress, just simple living. Linda had served in the military years ago. She came home with some injuries that made walking hard sometimes. Because of that, she used a wheelchair now and then, especially when her legs hurt too much to move. She also had two special dogs trained to help her every day. One helped her get things she couldn't reach, and the other could sense when something was wrong with her health. These dogs were more than pets. They were her lifeline. James worked part-time doing repairs for neighbors, and Linda volunteered at a local animal shelter when she felt up to it. They didn't ask for much from the world, just to be left alone, live their lives, and enjoy the little things like morning coffee on the porch and watching birds in the backyard. But trouble started knocking on their door when the HOA showed up. HOA stood for Homeowners Association. It was a group of people who made rules about how homes should look, what color you could paint your fence, where you could park your car, and even how many trash cans you could put out each week. Most people in the neighborhood were part of the HOA because they bought houses inside its area. But Linda and James didn't. Their house was just outside the HOA's official borders. At least that's what the paper said when they bought the place. Still, one day a man named Mr. Carlisle showed up at their door. He wore a clean white shirt and carried a clipboard like he was delivering important news. "Morning," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm with the HOA. We'd like to welcome you into our community." Linda smiled, politely, but stayed seated in her chair. "Thank you, but we're not part of the HOA. Our deed says we're independent." Mr. Carlisle nodded slowly, as if he already knew. "Well, we're trying to keep the whole neighborhood looking nice. Even those who aren't officially members can still help by following the same standards." James stepped forward. "We don't have a problem keeping things tidy, but we didn't sign up for the HOA, and we don't plan to start paying fees. Now," Carlisle's smile faded a little, "that's fine, but we'll still expect you to follow the same rules as everyone else." From that day on, the HOA began sending letters. At first, they were polite reminders about yard care and vehicle parking. Then the messages got harsher. They wrote about Linda's service van parked in the driveway, saying it looked too industrial and spoiled the view. They sent fines for things Linda had never agreed to be responsible for. She tried calling them, explaining again that they weren't under the HOA's control, but they always found new ways to push back. One time, a man came and took pictures of her house from the sidewalk, writing notes like she was being judged. Then came the call from a neighbor. "Hey, James," the voice said over the phone. "You might want to check your driveway. Something's going on." James rushed outside. His heart dropped. The van was gone. It wasn't just missing. It had been towed in the middle of the night. The accessible van Linda needed to go to doctor visits, grocery shopping, and therapy appointments was gone. And there was no note, no warning, just tire tracks on the road. He called the police, but they told him the tow company had claimed permission from the HOA. It turned out the HOA had lied, telling the towing company they had legal authority to remove vehicles parked improperly, even though Linda's house was clearly outside their zone. When Linda saw the empty spot where her van used to be, she didn't cry. She got angry. Not the kind of angry that makes you yell, but the kind that makes you think clearly. The kind that makes you decide enough is enough. She sat in her chair, hands gripping the wheels tightly, and looked at James. They think they can take what's mine? Think I won't fight back? James shook his head. No way. We're not letting this slide. They filed reports with the sheriff's office. Linda called lawyers. They reached out to veterans groups and disability rights organizations, but none of it brought the van back quickly, and that's when Linda decided to do something unexpected. She picked up the phone and called an old friend who worked with K-9 units. She asked if they could bring a few working dogs over for a visit. Her idea wasn't to scare anyone, but to send a message. If the HOA wanted to treat her like someone weak who could be pushed around, she would show them just how strong she really was. She didn't need loud protests or angry signs. All she needed was her dogs and the power of truth. Because while they thought she was just a disabled woman living quietly in a modest home, they were about to find out she was also a fighter. The K-9 event was more powerful than Linda had imagined. Not only did it bring people together, but it also gave her a voice she hadn't known she needed. For years, she had lived quietly, keeping to herself and staying out of trouble. But now she found herself speaking up, not just for herself but for others who had been treated unfairly by HOAs too. Reporters kept showing up at her door. Local news stations played clips from the K-9 demonstration. One video showed Max walking beside Linda as she spoke to the crowd, calm and confident. People think because I use a wheelchair sometimes or because I live a quiet life, that I'm easy to push around, Linda said into the microphone. But I've survived worse than this. The clip spread quickly online. Comments poured in, some from veterans thanking her for standing up, others from homeowners sharing their own HOA horror stories. A few even said they had paid fines or followed rules they didn't agree with, just to avoid trouble. Linda read every message. She replied when she could. And slowly, something began to change. She wasn't just a woman who had lost her van anymore. She was becoming a symbol. One evening, while sitting on the porch with James, she got a call from a lawyer named Sarah Collins. Sarah had seen Linda's story online and wanted to help. I specialize in housing rights and disability law, Sarah explained. And what happened to you? That's not just wrong. It might be illegal. Linda leaned forward, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. You think we can actually do something about it? I know we can, Sarah said. If the HOA doesn't have authority over your property, then they had no right to have your van towed. That's called wrongful seizure. And if they targeted you because of your disability, that could be discrimination. Linda felt a rush of emotion. She had always believed she was in the right, but hearing it from a real lawyer made it feel real. They met with Sarah the next week. Linda brought all the documents, the deed to her home, the maps, the letters from the HOA, and even photos from the K-9 event. James sat beside her, ready to support whatever came next. Sarah flipped through everything carefully before looking up. This is solid, she said. We file a complaint with the county first, then we go after the HOA and the towing company. You deserve to get your van back and maybe some compensation for what they put you through. Linda nodded. Let's do it. Filing the complaint set things in motion. The county office opened an investigation into the HOA's actions. They looked at how many other homes might have been wrongly included in HOA rules. They checked records, talked to neighbors, and reviewed past complaints. At the same time, word continued to spread about Linda's case. A local radio host invited her on his show. He asked questions about her experience, and Linda answered honestly. I never asked for any of this, she said. All I wanted was to live peacefully in my own home. But when someone tries to take what's yours, especially without any reason, you have to stand up. Her interview went viral again. More people reached out. Some offered donations to help cover legal fees. Others shared their own stories of being fined for small things like having a basketball hoop in the driveway, or painting their house the wrong color. Then came the biggest surprise yet. A state senator saw Linda's story and sent her a message. He was working on a bill to protect homeowners from HOA abuse, and he wanted to include her case as an example. Linda couldn't believe it. Her fight wasn't just about getting her van back anymore. It was about changing the system so others wouldn't have to go through the same thing. Still, the HOA wasn't done trying to fight back. Mr. Carlisle, the man who had first visited, their home showed up again one afternoon. This time he wore a tighter smile and carried no clipboard. "We heard you're making a big deal out of this," he said. Linda sat calmly in her chair, Max watching him closely. "I'm just telling the truth," she replied. Carlisle crossed his arms. "We were trying to keep things friendly. We still can if you drop the lawsuit." Linda laughed softly. "I don't think you understand. This isn't about being friends. It's about doing what's right." He didn't say much after that, just turned and walked away. That night, Linda sat outside again, looking up at the stars. James handed her a cup of tea. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "Yeah, better than okay." James sat beside her. "What happens next?" She took a slow sip. "Now we wait, and we keep fighting." Because even though the battle wasn't over, Linda knew one thing for sure. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The day finally came when Linda got her van back. It was early morning when she heard the sound of tires on gravel. She was sitting outside with Max, enjoying a cup of tea and watching the sunrise. James stepped out too, squinting as a tow truck pulled into their driveway. Linda felt a knot in her stomach. For a second, she thought the HOA was trying something again. But then the driver stepped out, and he wasn't from the HOA. He wore a different uniform, one from a county-approved towing service. "Mrs. Harper?" he called out. She nodded. He walked over and handed her a clipboard. "We're returning your vehicle today. Court order." Linda stared at him for a moment before signing the form. Her hands were steady, but her heart was full. James helped get the van unloaded while Linda sat nearby, watching like it was something too good to be true. When they opened the doors, everything was still inside. Her wheelchair ramp worked fine, her medical supplies were untouched, and even the little dog blanket Max used to ride in the back was still there. She looked at James and smiled. "We did it," she said softly. He kissed her forehead. "You did it." The victory didn't stop there. Soon after, the court ruled that the HOA had acted unlawfully. They were fined for misrepresenting their authority and ordered to update their rules so no other homeowner would be targeted unfairly. The towing company also faced consequences. They were required to retrain their staff and make sure they checked legal boundaries before removing any vehicle. Most importantly, the case became an example for others. Across the state, more people started speaking up about unfair HOA rules. Some homeowners began forming support groups. Others shared tips online about how to check property lines and understand local laws. Even the state senator, who had reached out earlier, kept Linda updated on a new bill being proposed, the Homeowner Protection Act. Its goal was to clearly define HOA limits and protect people with disabilities from being targeted. Linda was invited to speak at a public hearing about the bill. She stood in front of lawmakers, surrounded by veterans, families, and community leaders. "I'm not here because I wanted a fight," she told them. "I'm here because I believe everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home, no matter what chair they sit in or what kind of dog they walk." Her words were met with applause. After the hearing, several lawmakers thanked her personally. One even asked if she'd help review future housing policies. She laughed and said, "Only if you promise to listen." With the case behind her, Linda could have gone back to her quiet life. And for the most part, she did. She still woke up early, still drank coffee on the porch, still spent time training Max and helping other service dogs learn new skills. But now she also had a new purpose. She started a small nonprofit called Freedom from Fear, aimed at helping homeowners who were being pushed around by HOAs or unfair rules. The group offered free legal advice, held workshops, and connected people who needed support. She also partnered with Maria's K-9 Center to host more events, not just demonstrations, but awareness drives about disability rights, community safety, and how to stand up for yourself without losing your peace. Max became a bit of a local celebrity. Kids loved meeting him during school visits, and veterans found comfort in seeing how much he helped Linda every day. Neighbors who once barely knew her name now waved hello when they passed by. One neighbor even brought over a thank you note. "You didn't just fight for yourself," it read. "You reminded all of us we have the right to stand tall, even if we use a cane or a chair." Months later, Linda sat on the porch again, Max curled up beside her. James brought out 2 cups of tea and sat next to her. "You ever think you'd end up doing all this?" he asked. She smiled. "Not in a million years." He chuckled. "Me neither, but I'm proud of you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thanks, I'm proud of us." They watched the sun dip lower in the sky, painting the clouds in soft colors. The world felt calm again. Inside the house, her phone buzzed with messages, from people asking for help, sharing their stories, thanking her for giving them courage. Outside, a breeze rustled the trees, and Max let out a soft sigh in his sleep. Everything felt right, because Linda hadn't just gotten her van back. She had gotten her voice back, and in doing so, she had given others the strength to find theirs. That's the end of Linda's story, but not the end of her impact, because sometimes, one person standing up can give hope to many more. The days after filing the complaint felt like waiting for a storm to break. Linda knew she had done the right thing, but that didn't make it any easier. The HOA hadn't said much since their last visit, but she could feel them watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Then one morning, a letter came in the mail. Official looking, sealed with a county stamp. James brought it to her while she was feeding Max his breakfast. "You got something from the county office," he said, handing her the envelope. Linda opened it carefully. Her heart beat faster as she read the words. "After reviewing your case and all submitted documents, we confirm that your property is not under the jurisdiction of the local HOA. Therefore, the towing of your vehicle was conducted without lawful authority." She looked up at James, eyes wide. "They agree with us," she whispered. James smiled. "That's huge. It wasn't a full victory yet, but it was proof. Proof that the HOA had gone too far. And now, the county was on her side." With that confirmation, Sarah, her lawyer, moved quickly. She sent a formal notice to both the HOA and the towing company, demanding that Linda's van be returned immediately and that they issue a public apology. The HOA tried to play it cool at first. Mr. Carlisle called Sarah and offered a deal. Return the van quietly, and they'd drop the lawsuit. Sarah didn't even pause before saying no. "We're not here to settle quietly," she told Linda later. "We're here to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Meanwhile, the media kept covering Linda's story. A reporter from a statewide news program came out to interview her again. "This isn't just about a towed van," the reporter said during the interview. "This is about power, control, and who really gets to make the rules in our neighborhoods." Linda nodded. "Exactly. People think HOAs are just there to keep things pretty, but some of them act like they have more power than the law does. That has to change." Her words hit home with many viewers. By the end of the week, dozens of people from across the state were reaching out to Sarah's office, asking if they could get help fighting their own HOA battles. Back at home, life went on. Linda continued working with Max, training him for new tasks. She started volunteering again at the animal shelter, helping train therapy dogs for kids and veterans. But something had changed in her. She still liked peace. She still loved quiet mornings on the porch. But now, she also knew the power of speaking up, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Then came the biggest surprise yet. One afternoon, a man showed up at her door wearing a badge and a friendly smile. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked. "I'm Deputy Ramirez with the sheriff's office." Linda invited him in, and Max greeted him with a wagging tail. "I'm here because of your case," Ramirez said. "We've been following it closely, and I wanted to let you know. We've launched an internal review of the towing company involved. Linda leaned forward. What does that mean? It means we're checking if they've done this kind of thing before, if they've taken vehicles without proper cause, if they've targeted certain people, like those with disabilities. Linda felt a lump in her throat. That would mean others might have gone through the same thing. Ramirez nodded. Yes, and we want to make sure justice is served. It was a big step. Real action. Not just words. Still, Linda knew the fight wasn't over. The HOA hadn't apologized, the van still hadn't been returned, and the legal battle was only beginning. So she did what she always did when things got tough. She reached out to the people who cared. Maria, her friend from the K-9 Center, helped organize another event, this time bigger. They called it Freedom from Fear, Voices of the Community. It was part rally, part celebration of everyday people standing up for their rights. More reporters came. More families showed up. Even a few local leaders spoke out in support of Linda's case. At the end of the event, Linda stood in front of the crowd, Max beside her, and said something simple, but powerful. I don't want revenge, she said. I want fairness. I want every person, disabled or not, to know that just because someone says you have to follow a rule doesn't mean it's the right one. The crowd clapped loudly. That night, as she sat outside with James, the stars above seemed brighter than usual. You think we'll win? James asked softly. Linda smiled. We already have. We made people care. Now it's just a matter of time before the rest catches up. Inside the house, her phone buzzed with messages. Support, stories, hope. Outside, Max curled up beside her chair, ready to protect her as always. And somewhere down the road, change was coming. Slowly. Surely. And Linda was ready for it.